International Plant Propagators Society is an organisation devoted to seeking and sharing knowledge on propagation of plants broadly. At a recent meeting of the Society, a few top grafters in Australia gave their time freely to show some of the intricate techniques available. It should be noted that there is a range of different techniques and each propagator has an individual style. These propagators all have made a living out of their propagation techniques and are able to do it at a very fast rate and also have a very high rate of performance and success. Also in the video we will show you some of the tools used in grafting, specifically grafting knives and also the tapes. Safety is an important issue in any workplace and safety in using grafting knives should not be forgotten, and we will cover some aspects of that safety. Citrus is one of the most widely grown of the subtropical fruits. Ian Tolley has developed a technique for the micro-propagation of citrus. It's called micro-budding. Ian will demonstrate this along with some of the aspects of how he holds his tools, how he maintains his tools, and also how he prepares his workplace, a very important issue if you're going to get very high rates of success.
I guess that the thing that interests me with propagation is to get the budding process done as early as possible. And the reason for that is that if you can match the micro bud or the chip bud to the size of the stock at the right height that you want to bud early, then both the sign and the rootstock grow together and you finish up with a more uniform tree than if you wait till you have a massive plant, put a bud in, cut or lop the top, and then it takes quite a while for them to become more uniform. Chip budding is another form of using a microbud, a large microbud, where you need to put the bud on the outside of the stock when the stock, like this, is very much bigger than the budwood you have, and you don't want the callus to form around the bud. So we'll do that as a chip bud. It's basically the same. You just take the petiole off and then you do a wedge using your sharp knife, go straight through, not right through, but do a cut and you've got a chip bud. Okay, it's cut at an angle and you can see that it's a fairly fine one. So now the idea is to put this into a fine cut and cut it the same way and then insert this chip bud straight into the piece you've left. Now you must keep the cambium along the side to match. If it's too wide like this is, which is normal, you move it to one side and if it needs trimming, that's it. Now the next important part is to make sure that you tie it firmly, and this is the tape we referred to earlier with very many ribs on it, so it's very tensile and makes for a good tie. And since that's delicate and it might fall out again, you do your tie at the top of the bud away from it so that you're not knocking it. So you do a lock like that, never let the tie go, come round with your finger and then you can go very carefully over the top of your bud, making sure that it's lined up cambium to cambium. And once you've done that piece, the rest is fairly simple. Still across, still in line, but pulling this side so you don't tend to pull the bud over away from you out of line. It doesn't matter what happens to this flap if it gets folded in. So you just keep going firmly, really stretching the tape till you get down past it. If you've done too much tape, well then come back. Now this, instead of keeping the tape wide, you do it thin, squeeze it, so that when you get your fingers to put your loop, you see you've got a nice big hole here where that finger is to put the tie right through. You can see it there,
And it's just a matter of pulling and continuing to pull around the same way that you've done it. Now that means, as you can see here, and I'll turn it round, that the bud itself is well out from the line of the bark, so that the callus will grow around it but won't grow over it. And that's the essential difference with having a chip bud on the outside.
These days, a state of the art right at this moment, there is a new budding tape which is ribbed, and I use it in Asian countries a lot where the temperatures are rather higher, like it is in Queensland, North Queensland. They have greater tensile strength so that you can hear it run through your fingers and you know that the tire is tying tight. That's essential. On the other hand, if you're getting down to smaller stocks because that particular stock is not such a strong grower, then the use of parafilm in the new half-inch strips. In the early days I was given 2-inch material and it's dreadful. In fact, I abandoned it. But the new half-inch strip parafilm for microbuds is perfectly okay. There is the other one that's worth mentioning, or the other type, is a coloured tape. I've used red, grey, brown, green and a white one. We did a trial at the university on these over a number of seasons, 3 I think, and it was quite interesting. The red tape accelerates the callousing by about another 30%. So if you're racing at the end of the season to get those last buds in, you're worried about the weather going, then red tape definitely is a winner. On the other hand, if you're in the middle of the season, it's an absolute disaster because it calluses so rapidly, it actually grows in great bulbous lumps all around the bud, and it is a disaster. So in basic terms, for the beginner, the new rib tape rather than the clear tape is ideal and is a good general purpose. If you want one, that's it.
This particular process is called microbudding, and it really means micro, meaning a smaller bud than usual. We've long since passed the point where the old days they used to think about having wood in a bud or out of a bud. It doesn't matter because cell breakdown, as I said earlier, occurs within 24 to 48 hours, and so what we need to do is to cut buds off budwood very straight so that we can sit it flat on the cambium surface when we open the bark. So when you have smaller stocks, you need smaller buds, and so I coined the term microbud, and in this case this is what I would call, in terms of area, a large microbud. If I had to bud this up here, and it is quite possible to do that, and particularly for special purposes, you would certainly call that a true microbud, in which case you would cut the bud smaller. Now let me demonstrate that just before we start the actual process. You must develop a safe handling procedure so that your hands are together, your arms are in close to your body, where your sight is easier and you have control. It is very important to understand that you're using a knife which is extremely sharp, and since I'm left-handed, you might be able to see that this is sharpened only on one face. On the other face it isn't sharpened at all. Now this is so that when you do your cutting, it will sit flat, cut flat, will not slip, will not come out in a curve, and therefore you're safe. So you use a left-handed knife for a left-handed person and so on. Now cutting the bud, you lay the knife on the back of the wood, clearing the bud. I think you can see the top of the bud there. You just cut that off square, the petiole, and then keeping it firm, comfortable, just slice the bud off, and there you have a micro bud. If you want a bigger bud, even from the same stick, slicing it, and you can see that you've got 2 buds which are quite twice the length. So you then cut the bud to the size of the stock that you're going to use. So let's have a go at this one. and see how we go. First of all, I usually rub with my fingers to get any dirt or dust off the stock. And then again, you get the stock under your arm, right or left-handed. Keep the stock firm. Doesn't matter what the pot is doing, but this, where you're going to cut, is very important to keep it straight. Now, the curve of this knife, right on the tip, is the key to good budding, because you're not going to slice and therefore do a dangerous act. You should be able to just push it in, tip it. That cuts it sufficiently. You go over the tip, go past and bend it back, and you can see that, I'll point this out, you can see now that the two pieces have opened up. I'll lift it to make it easier to see, but that process is just very simply over. When you get past that flap, you come round to open it out. Now, having done that, you only have to cut the bud again, and that bud then can be pushed into the stock. You can do that if you've got a long fingernail, which I haven't, or you can use the tip of your knife on the petiole, and you won't damage the bud in that process, but you must always make sure that you go down well past the cut and down there, because otherwise the callus won't form cleanly. These must close right down. So the tying is again the same process as chip budding. You must get that top well and truly firm down. In this case, you can tie it, the same process, over the top. The bud is much safer in there because the bark is holding it. Over the top, sorry. What did I say? Don't let go of the tape. Okay, here we go. Over the top, sealing that bud right in, sealing the flaps in, and that the rest of it is straightforward. Just straight down, keeping it tight. Pinch the tape so that you can get your finger well and truly in. So here we go. There it is. Keeping the tape tight, pulling it round. Now that process can be used in a larger or smaller bud anywhere up this stock. So long as the material is somewhat round, there will be enough bark there for you to put a small bud. So let's just finish this session by doing one or two more buds to show the differences only in microbuds. If you want an extremely fine bud, that's it. If you want something a little longer, still do the same process, but start earlier, keeping it flat. And if you want a bigger bud, you can see the difference. That can be enhanced if you need to go to bigger buds by using bigger budwood, and you can still though get small buds. There it is, a microbud. But if you want a bigger bud, then keeping your hands firm and you slice, you can't go through in one hit, do it a second time, and you can get bigger buds. This is a comparison between what we would call here a microbud, where the bud goes in behind the bark, cambium to cambium, and you can use that process to do very small stocks. If you get onto very big stocks like this one, then that small microbud would be buried in the thicker bark. And so a chip bud, merely a slice, a cut, and pushed on the top, shows you on a side angle, comparing the two, that this one sticks out very much from the bark. This one is very much in the bark. But other than that, the process is exactly the same. One of the things that you need to do to get yourself organised for budding or grafting is to have your equipment at hand. It's no good looking somewhere else. Now what this bag does is give you the opportunity to store extra rolls of tape, whether they be conventional budding tape or whether you want to use parafilm, or this is in fact Max Tapener. This is parafilm. You've got it stored here for use. In the centre here, sharpening, if you drop one of your knives, you finish up needing to sharpen it, but ordinary grindstones are terrible on grafting and budding knives. They tend to take too much steel off. So here we have a coarse, medium and fine diamond hone, merely to make sure that you keep the edge of this knife absolutely to shape. And so that's nice to have them in storage. As we have here, we've got the grafting knives, trimming knives, grafting knives. All of these are handy, easy to get at, and if you're cutting plastic tape, you never use your budding knife, because it's murder on tape. These simple, cheap Stanley knives are very good to cut the back off the tape, and so having those, you can turn it back, it's safe, stick it back in your tape. And the other thing is, standing up all day or bending over all day is very tiring on your back. If you're going to do 5, 6, 7, 800 buds, microbuds or chip buds a day, which is quite within normal parameters, you should be using something like this simple stool. It has wide feet, and the idea is that when you sit on it, it can rock. If you want to get a little closer to your work or a little further back, you can do that quite comfortably. Now, the one other thing that I didn't mention is that this is a better way to keep a knife sharper by having a solid centre instead of the old grandpa's old strop, which was flexible, but to use this piece of cowhide, outside, inside. If you drop that knife on something hard, you may bend the edge, in which case you can carefully force it on that hard surface back into shape, and then to get it really sharp again, then you use it as a strop. So it's quite handy to do that, and your knife will last for years and years, and it's a very safe operation. And you have it attached to your belt, so it's always there. And the final thing with this is having your budding knife where you can get it. A bit like Quick Draw McGraw in the cowboy films, it's got to be there when you need it. And that's about the strength of it. It's soft, it can bend in, it makes you comfortable. You should be happy and comfortable in what you're doing.
Peter Smith is an IPPS member from Mildura. Peter has developed a technique for the propagation of quandongs, a new fruit for Australia. Peter uses a very fine technique which he has devised to be able to handle the very thin stem diameters of the quandongs.
Yeah, the quandong's it's an Australian native, Santalum acuminatum, botanical name. It's got some cousins. It's an in vogue bush tucker plant. Quandong is a common name, and so too is bush peach. We grow them in a grow tube, a root training grow tube, which is 30 centimetres deep, 50 centimetres in diameter. Reason we use such a small tube is we can get a lot of them into a propagating area. But basically, it's a very slow growing plant. It's a partial root parasite. And as such, it's not a vigorous grower. In fact, if it doesn't hook onto some host plant in the wild, then it won't survive. What we've got here is 2 seedling quandong rootstocks. And I'm going to graft a selected scion, a particular cultivar, which has virtues determined by scientists, free fruiting, large fruit, large flesh to pit ratio, etc., onto this seedling stock. And the tools that I'm going to use consist of a budding knife, florist's tape, I think it's called parafilm, small plastic bag, zip bag, that can be done up, which I'll place over the scion having grafted it. In addition to that, we've got this support frame to hold 2 tubes. The reason we need this support frame is we grow this particular plant in a small tube which will not stand up by itself, so it needs support. The first thing I do is to prepare the stock for grafting. And I'm going to insert the graft just above a node. We have here a bud, and I've prepared about 1 centimetre above the bud, and I will now cleft the stock in order to insert the scion. So there, I've opened the stock, readiness for inserting the scion. Now, to select the correct tissue for grafting with a soft scion like this, I need semi-ripe wood. To determine the ripeness of the wood, I put the wood twixt fingers and thumb and press. In this instance, the pressure exerted tells me from experience that all of that top part of the growth is far too soft. And it's this section that I can use as scion material. I'll take a piece of wood cutting just below a bud, taking off the basal leaves, cutting the next set of leaves because I don't want to bruise the tissue by tearing the leaf from the scion, and I remove the buds and prepare the scion by creating a wedge, which is just thin slivers bearing the cambium tissue on both sides. I then insert the scion into the stock in the wedge. I take a small piece of parafilm, about 1 centimetre, it expands, and I use parafilm because it is self-adhesive. It's very readily wrapped around thin tissue, such as that I'm using. It's almost micro-grafting, I guess. And it sticks to itself. Note, on this graft, I leave the leaves intact. I then take a zip bag, which has not been used before, so it's very, very clean, and I place it over the scion and zip it up just below the graft being there. That plant is then taken and placed into a greenhouse in a relatively humid environment. I leave the leaves on the stock deliberately so that it's still functioning and moving sap towards the scion. The union will occur in about 21 days. At that point, I remove the bag. Grafting is usually done in spring. We're talking October, November in Mildura, in a desert climate. We keep the greenhouse below 30 degrees C and above 18 degrees C. And we simply maintain a moisture level in the root zone to support the stock until the scion is united.
Peter Young is an IPPS member from Queensland. Peter has developed propagation methods for the grafting of avocados. In this section, Peter will show 3 techniques. The first technique is whip, the second technique is top wedge, and the third technique is top side wedge, a system that he brought over from China.
Here Shannon's going to be demonstrating grafting an avocado tree. And why do we graft? We've got an unknown sexually produced seedling that's variable. We just don't know what it's going to do, whether it's even going to have fruit or not. And we're grafting onto it a piece of plant tissue, in this case Hass avocado, that we know exactly what the fruit is. so that when we plant the tree, we're actually changing the seedling into a known quantity, so a known variety. So Sharon's going to be demonstrating them for us here, and the first graft Sharon's going to do is a whip graft. Sharon, would you like to start the demonstration? Here she's cutting the top off the plant so she can make her, and she selects her piece of budwood first. It's got to be exactly the right size as the rootstock, and she trims the piece of budwood just with one cut, one single slash, which is called the whip. It needs to be fine-tuned, the cut, to make sure it's nice and flat, and that's right. And then you put that in, she puts that in her mouth to stop it from drying out, and Sharon makes one single cut, and just make sure it's nice and perfectly flat. Puts the grafting piece on the rootstock, and sometimes she'll need to trim the back of the rootstock if it's not quite right. And there it is. It's simple as that. And then we tie that up with a piece of clear plastic grafting tape. And this binds the two surfaces together. Not unlike a splint with a broken limb, and the mending's fairly similar. The two pieces callus together, the rootstock calluses onto the grafting piece. Now, if we just left it like that with the environment right now, the graft would most likely be successful and grow. But if we get some large swings in humidity, it's very dry or very hot or very cold, the graft may not be successful. So what we do is we enclose the graft in a high humidity environment by putting a plastic bag over it. The alternative is to take the plant into a high humidity area where it's constantly monitored in an igloo situation, a plastic igloo, but we put our plastic igloo around each graft. Right, that was the one method, was the whip graft, or splice graft is another name for it. And Sharon will now demonstrate another method, which is the cleft graft or wedge graft, which is a variation on that theme. It's a different, same principle of rootstock being grafted to scion, but here we actually prepare our scion material differently. It's very important to have a wide selection of different sizes of the grafting pieces so you can get the one that's just the right size. Here Sharon does a cut similar to the whip graft, turns it over and forms a wedge, cuts on both sides to form a wedge. Then the rootstock is split, the thickness of the grafting piece is in Sharon's mouth, shoved in, and it's got to match perfectly on both sides all round, which I'm sure it does. This is a little easier in the fact that it sits there while you tie it up, but it does take longer because there's usually an extra couple of cuts involved. That one we can do one every 20 seconds, the other one we can do one every 12 seconds, which is important in a commercial situation. Plastic bag on to keep the humidity in. Now the next one Sharon will do is a slight variation of both. She's actually going to do a graft which is similar to the whip graft and a little bit similar to a wedge graft, and we call it a top side cleft graft. Some people call it the Chinese graft because it's what they use in China exclusively. This graft is always used when our budwood isn't the same size as our rootstock. It's where the budwood's smaller than the rootstock. And here we do a cut similar to the whip graft on our grafting piece, turn it over, put a little chisel point on the bottom, not going all the way up like in the wedge graft or cleft graft. Then we split our rootstock just the thickness of the grafting piece down the side and shove it in. Now it's only matching on one side only and not on two sides like the cleft graft. This graft here is like a whip graft, and it's like a cleft graft, it's in between. It's one we're using more and more of in the nursery because we haven't got to be as precise with our grafting size or the scion piece sizes. In fact, on a tree like that, you could go right down to probably half a centimetre and still get a match on the rootstock. Here we have a topside cleft graft. You can see the small scion piece, small grafting piece, in relation to the thickness of the rootstock. It's been actually slipped down the side as Sharon demonstrated before, and the buds are just starting to grow now. You can see the graft union. These have been done at exactly 4 weeks. The rootstock shoots are just starting to grow at about the same time as the buds on the grafting piece are starting to grow. That just shows you that it does actually work. These are Gwen avocados, a new variety of avocado from the United States of America. Okay, here we have some young passion fruit seedlings. They're only a few weeks old, and after about 4 to 6 weeks they reach the size of this young seedling here, and which is ready to graft. Now we graft this yellow passion fruit rootstock that's resistant to disease with a purple tip that's going to give us a purple fruiting vine which is suitable for a commercial sale. Now we just look down here, we have these were grafted yesterday. You can see it looks a little wilty because the graft's only been performed about less than 24 hours ago. In the mornings they're standing up straight, and during the heat of the day they wilt a little, and within 3 or 4 days that graft would have knitted sufficiently for it to be standing up. We use a little bit different from the avocado grafting. We use disposable Gillette razor blades. We break them in half, and that's our knife. Why? Because they're cheap, they're sterile, and we can replace them easily. Passion fruit have virus problems that live in the plant tissue, and viruses are fairly difficult to get rid of out of metal from grafting knives and scalpels. Now we could use scalpels, but they're much more expensive than these little cheap scalpels, which are the razor blades. The type of tape we use, because we're working with soft tissue, is a florist tape, which is a little similar to thread tape, but not quite as strong. And the beauty of it is, on very soft tissue, it sticks to itself. You haven't got to tie it off. So you can see how it squashed my finger up there. And also the plant will burst it as it grows, so it hasn't got to be removed later, which is quite a fiddly job in small stems. So florist tape, it comes in 3 colours, so we can donate the different scion material. It's also very elastic. Now what I can do is show you, just as a matter of demonstration, I'm grafting a passion fruit. We'll pretend this is the tip. We'll pretend this is the rootstock, and I'll just graft this back on using the razor blade, and a cleft graft, which Sharon demonstrated in the avocados. The wedge, we usually put it in our mouth to stop it drying out. Make a corresponding cut on the rootstock. Now this is very sappy tissue. You can see how it's opened up a little. What we'll do is, because it's so sappy, we'll just start off underneath it a little, so we've got something to sit our point in. Normally you wouldn't be grafting into this sappy of material, but it is possible with this tape. Round we go. Instead of winding our tape on like Sharon did, we do a pass around the corner and wrap. Like playing a piano, you got to get all your fingers working. It sticks to itself. As the graft grows away, the tape will burst when the plant wants it to. It's grafting passion fruit.
Gary Isles is an IPPS member from New South Wales. Gary is the propagator for a large citrus nursery. Gary uses a very different technique to Ian Tolley, but has likewise large success. Gary uses a standard tea bud and demonstrates this method.
We're autumn budders. So we've got a seedling that's about pencil thickness or thicker. it's been cleaned of leaves and thorns earlier in the cycle, so that we're in most cases not cleaning the leaves and thorns off as we bud. Now that varies from operation to operation. Some people do it differently. We clean them before we bud. So we've got a clean stem on the rootstocks. Pencil thickness or thicker is what we aim to bud it at, and in full growth, plenty of sap. We've got here in front of us the material we need to do some citrus tea budding. We've got our rootstock here, prepared, cleaned, this part of the stem cleaned, and we've got our budding tape, our budding knife, and we've got our sign material, our budwood. Now budwood is prepared by cutting a mature branch off a mother tree, and the leaves are removed as soon as the branch is cut, similar fashion to this. So that we end up as this one's already been prepared. Now once our bud stick is prepared, we cut our bud using the whole blade of the knife, starting just above where the leaf was and coming through and holding it on the knife. Now we've taken that bud and we've just, in behind here, we've just got a thin slither of the wood. So we've got the cambium layer just underneath that sliver of wood. Now we endeavour to take a very thin slice of wood and leave the wood in the back of the bud. Right, we do a vertical cut like so. Then we do a horizontal cut, rolling the knife like so, which flares open the bud. The wood, as you see just here, the bark, and we run the knife down there and down there just to open the tea bud enough to slip the bud like so. And if the bud's too long, we just cut it off. There are various methods of tying the bud, covering it up. I personally start from the top of the bud. Most people start from the bottom that I know, but I like to start from the top. So I take the tape 1/3 to the right of the bud, 2/3 of the tape to the left. So we go around, we bring the tape from behind and we catch it in a half hitch like so. We do a second roll over the bud, a third straight over the eye, fourth one underneath. Then we pick up this piece that's been hanging down the back, bring it around the front, and just tuck it under like so. And that's prepared, and that plastic's left on there for 21 days.
Safety in grafting is very important. This is a grafting knife, and as you can see, it's a fairly sharp instrument. It's meant to be. The edge on it is honed to a very fine level. This way the grafter can slice through the wood very, very quickly. Likewise, it can slice through your finger just as fast. The first rule with the grafting knife is that if you're not going to use it or have it in operation, keep it folded up and in the pouch or on the table or in your box. So only open it when you need it. For a lot of grafters, they prefer not to have the knife on the table because it may pick up contamination. So when they're not using it, they will actually place it between the last two fingers on their left hand if they're right-handed. This way, when they're doing their taping, they can ensure that the knife is clean and it's out of the way of a cut. Secateurs as well are an important part of a grafter's toolkit. Secateurs should be very sharp and they also should be very clean. This way you can get very good cuts and you can also ensure that the grafting process can happen very fast. Like the grafting knife, the secateurs have a very sharp edge, and this would not only cut through plant material but could also cut through a finger or nick you on the hand. Both the grafting knife and the secateurs can occasionally be dropped. It's important when they are dropped that you wear safety shoes, so that if they hit the floor they don't go through your shoe first. Safety is an important issue, and for very fast work you'll find that that is a risk. There's many grafting knives that are available for use by a propagator. I have a range of knives in front of me. The knives can be used for different sorts of purposes, and I've got some samples of each here. The first purpose that you can use a grafting knife for is budding. With a budder you'll need a knife such as this one with a rounded end on it. That rounded end is useful for when you're making an incision cut on the wood. You'll notice this with the citrus budding, particularly the micro budding. Another budding knife is this particular one, which is a lot smaller knife and designed to be used right in the tops of your fingers. The blade is still rounded at the edge, but it has a cutout on the rear part of the knife. This is so that when the bud is taken up to the top, it can be turned over and placed directly into the T section on the rootstock. This knife also has a soft bone handle, and the back of the knife is useful for opening up sections of the T, and it's also very soft, quite a nice knife to work in. That's budding. The next thing you use a grafting knife for is obviously grafting, and this particular knife is designed as a straight grafting knife. It has a reasonably strong back, a very straight front blade, and is very useful for slicing. You'll notice on grafting knives that one side of it's flat and the other side is beveled. This is so that when you slice through the wood, you slide the knife through the wood, the outer section peels off, whereas the back of the wood is actually very flat. It works similar to a plane. If you're sharpening your grafting knife, you obviously don't sharpen the back of it, you sharpen the bevel. That's a straight grafting knife. The next one is a pruning knife. The pruning knife has a curve on the edge of it, so that when you're going through and cutting through a piece of wood, that just tidies off the last little bit of it. It's a very strong knife, and the handle also has a hook to give you extra bite when you're pulling through some hard material. Also note that grafting knives come right-handed and left-handed. This particular knife is a right-handed grafting knife. If held in the right hand and pulled towards you, the bevel is on the top and the flat is on the bottom. This is a left-handed grafting knife, and if you hold it in your right hand, you can see that the flat is on the top and the bevel is on the bottom. This knife is meant to be used in such manner by a left-handed. Sometimes you can get knives that are both grafting and budding, and we have a sample of one here. With this grafting / budding knife, it has a long flat section useful for grafting and a small turned over section on the end useful for budding, with a bark lifter on the back. In this case it's brass. The advantage of this knife is that it suits a dual purpose. The disadvantage is that it's not exactly a budder or exactly a grafter, and as such some propagators would prefer to have very specialist equipment. Take care with your grafting knives. When you finish using them for the day, put a drop of oil on them. Next morning before you use them again, make sure that oil is completely removed, because oil is toxic to a lot of the plants, and a thin layer of oil on your grafting cuts will mean the death of that particular plant.